Okay, and we are live.
Good morning. This is the meeting of the South Coast British Columbia Transportation Authority Police Board. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the Metro Vancouver Transit Police operate through the traditional territories of the Lower Mainland Coast Salish peoples. And we acknowledge our hosts and thank them for their hospitality on these lands. Calling the meeting to order at 9:03. And at the outset, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the heartbreaking news that came out last week of the bodies of 215 children found buried at the former Kamloops Residential School. I know I speak for the whole board and the chief officer when I say that words cannot express the sorrow and anger and grief felt by Canadians, and especially by Indigenous communities across our country. We know that this was not an isolated incident, and the deaths of these children and the cultural genocide perpetrated by the residential school system are our enduring Canadian shame. We acknowledge these wrongs and recognize that the harm, pain, and trauma continues today. All police boards, including our Metro Vancouver Transit Police Board, have a duty to act to advance truth and reconciliation. Following from our work over the last several years, including our report strengthening transit police support to Indigenous people, we have implemented several new initiatives. From increasing our training about the impact of colonization on Indigenous peoples and about cultural humility and awareness, to establishing new outreach programs like the Blue Eagle Community Cadet Program. I particularly want to acknowledge the dedication of our community engagement team and our Indigenous liaison officer who lead us and guide us in this work. But we have much more to do. We recognize that long-term respectful work is required by us, the board and the MVTP, to build good relations with Indigenous peoples. The Transit Police is absolutely committed to the work of reconciliation, and we will continue to prioritize this work, including through ongoing respectful consultation and engagement with the Indigenous communities we serve. I also want to take a minute to talk about the terrible attack on a Muslim family out for an evening walk in London, Ontario last week. 3 generations murdered, a child orphaned, all because of their faith. This is sickening, horrifying, completely unacceptable. We grieve with the Muslim community in Canada and condemn the scourge of Islamophobia. Hate crimes and attacks are on the rise in Canada. Our own region has recently gained worldwide notoriety as the epicenter of anti-Asian hate crime in North America. This is terrible. This is intolerable. No one in our community should be targeted for who they are. We can't look away. We must push back and stand up against racism in all its forms. We are all connected and all affected by injustice. And so we must all do what we can to work together to make change, to make our community a place of safety and belonging for everyone. On behalf of the MVTP board and members, I recommit to the public that we will work to ensure that the Transit Police works every day so that everyone feels safe and secure on the system and that all staff feel proud to work at Transit Police. Among other initiatives, the Transit Police will be implementing more anti-racism, implicit bias, and diversity training for all members, sworn and civilian, to ensure we can advance inclusion, respect, and dignity for all the communities we serve across the region. Our people do a tough job in an often challenging environment and are outstanding professionals committed to doing their best. We will continue to give them the tools they need to do their jobs and ensure the public that our members walk the talk. Our board will continue its own training to ensure that we keep a sharp focus on equity, inclusion, and diversity as we get into the post-COVID period, ridership returns, and the system continues to grow. We commit that the Transit Police will promote and support diversity across our organization, build understanding and skill throughout our workforce, reach out respectfully to the communities we serve, and we will embed these objectives and the actions that support them into our strategic plan. And we will report to the public on our results. The Transit Police role is to maintain safety and security on the transit system for everyone. Nothing less will do. And that is our commitment. And now I'll turn to the next item on the agenda. Item 1.2, following items will be considered on the consent agenda. Items A to I. Does anyone want to discuss any of those items or to remove them for discussion later?
Item G.
G. Okay. Anything else?
I'll move that with the removal of G.
Okay. Now, shall we discuss item G?
Sure. Thank you, and very well said to our chair. Very heartfelt, and I think everybody feels the same way. And I'm sure that throughout this meeting and future meetings, there'll be further discussions about the implementation and how we as a board work together collectively to achieve the goals that you've just described. One of the things that I wanted just to talk about in item G was with regards to the report itself, and just asking, if I may, I thought it was a very good report, very positive work being done by the members. The homeless outreach officer, Constable Shipley, that was a great quote in the document. My question, I guess, to the board and is just asking, is there more that we as a board can do to seek additional either government funding or community funding to deal with some of the essentials that he described? It sounds like he's doing a lot of this out of the trunk of his car, begging for stuff. It's such an important aspect, especially related to just what the chair was talking about. Is there anything that we as a board, do you believe, and I've asked the chair this, that we can maybe seek further funding, or through to the chief if there's something else? It just seems like a really good program done by the police, but in particular that one constable.
Chief, do you think that you can help us with that question?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I guess there's sometimes limited opportunities for us to find those extra funding sources. We do, as he's indicated, tap into some of the community. We do tap into TransLink, who has some funding and programs. But you'll hear today too, as like what to say, the Blue Eagle Cadet program is another one that also requires funding. So we do have to look at a balance. But I appreciate George's that desire as the board, have the ability to look at, alternate funding or funding sources for specifically for activities or programs such as this. So, we're constantly looking. We do on some occasions receive funding from item or places such as like the Vancouver Police Foundation for some of ours. So some agencies have created a foundation. We did talk about that in the past, but they're not something that is I want to say easy to do, but requires a lot of attention as well and commitment from probably an independent person to actually run that type of thing. So I go back to yourself. I guess George's question a bit is there something the board can do? We do look at our funding sources, grants, where we can take in donations and what we can do, and the members themselves, including I should never omit that the members themselves donate time, cash, and items to these causes. So.
Yeah, I would just follow up by saying, Chief, I think if you've got a good board here that's connected to the community, and our role is really to represent the community and provide that civilian oversight that we always talk about, but through maybe various connections that we have as individuals, either to community committees or other funding sources, or know how grants are done, or this just seemed to be such a worthy activity led by this particular constable, and the work obviously is really street level. It's one of those ones that I hope that maybe, we as a board can come up with something either individually or collectively to find maybe further funding for that as well. That's all.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. So can I have someone move the recommendation?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. That the South Coast British Columbia Transportation Authority Police Board of Directors approves and receives for information following items on the consent agenda, A to I. All in favor? Thank you. Do we have any public delegations today?
We do not, Sarah.
If we could move to item 2.1, I'd like to welcome Indigenous Liaison Officer Constable Kirk Rattray to tell us more about the Blue Eagle Cadet Youth Program.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Sarah, for your heartfelt and important acknowledgement of something that's happened in the past. That I think evidence is coming to forefront because I think First Nations people knew these graves existed for a long time, right? So,
yeah.
So thank you for that. I had a couple uncles that went to residential school, so it's still, even for myself, like this brings up a lot of emotions and negative feelings, that sort of thing. So I can't imagine for survivors or children of survivors, right? So
Absolutely.
again, thank you for that. So I appreciate the invitation today as well to talk about our program. Just to give you a little bit of background on that, I had previous experience when I was with the Winnipeg Police Service. We had a program there, community cadet program, and when I went to the Statland Tribal Police, I took that program there. In both places, we had really good response from the youth. So I thought, well, let's try to do that here. And because I was an NPO for East Vancouver and then the Indigenous Liaison Officer. So I made some relationships, especially with, Rick LaValle with the VPD, Indigenous Liaison Officer. And I kind of pitched him this idea and we thought it was good. So I know the BPD cadet program is a well-run program and they have really good response there as well. So we decided to do a younger version of that. So from youth from 12 to 15, and we decided to kind of focus on the Indigenous perspective with our program, primarily due to, I think it was 2019 when we, as the MPO for the Broadway commercial area, we found that, there was a lot of youth that were doing gang-related activities. So like assaults, robberies, assaulting people with, weapons, bear spray, that sort of thing. So when we looked at the numbers combined with Sergeant Dave Balance of the youth, BPD Youth Squad, we found that there was about 28, identified about 28 youth that were involved in these activities. And of those youth, and I think it was determined that we had approximately 80% of the youth were between the ages of 12 and 15 that were Indigenous. So 80% of that group of 28 fell into that age range and that demographic. So with that, I submitted a funding proposal to BC Civil Forfeiture's office and for a startup funding for our program. So I was successful in getting that funding. And so that led to starting our program. So, and with that, I also approached Mr. Norm Leach at the Vancouver Aboriginal Community Policing Center, and he was willing to assist in any way. So he has provided some funding as well for certain events and activities, which I'll mention a bit later. So with Rick from Vancouver Police Department and Norm from the CPC, we were able to get our program launched on March 11th, and we had an open house that day, and we had quite a bit of interest. Like we had probably 10 or 11 youth that came to the open house at the Britannia Community Center, and that's another one as well. The community center, they decided to, because they wanted some services like for youth, especially through COVID, that they decided to waive their fee. So that saved us money as well, where we would be able to use the facility in the gymnasium there for free. So until COVID's over, at least. So we're able to do that. So and like I said, part of our Indigenous aspect of this is that we had wanted to invite elders and community leaders to the program to show the kids, different ways of doing things and trying to build their cultural awareness, because a lot of urban Indigenous youth don't have that cultural background. So Rick was the leader in helping to get that out to the kids. And then we also invited other elders, like Mrs. Kat Norris came, and she did drumming and singing with them, and actually taught them how to kind of just start trying to do a little bit of dance as well. So that was a good evening. So we had this, and plus we talked about a lot of the issues that came up as well. And one of them was, the 215 youth that were found in the gravesite in Kamloops. So we were able to talk with them about that, and some of the families were having difficulties as well. So we were able to reach out to some of the families because they were, like I said, they were having difficulties, and just kind of talk to them about that as well. So. And another focus of ours is that we try and have a guest speaker attend. We've had retired officer Doug Spencer from Odd Squad come and talk about anti-gang. We had Mr. Ballantyne from the Ballantyne Project come and talk to them about life on the reserve, and then how he transitioned into the urban Indigenous community. And we also had one of Shiraz's friends who has some exotic cars to come and do a little car show for them. So those type of activities. And we also do like throughout the evening, we'll do like military style drill. We start out like with a talking circle. So we do an introduction and kind of check in with the kids, see how they're doing, see how their week was. And it gives an opportunity for them to, express how they feel if there's an issue coming that they have. So it's just those, that's kind of like our regular type of a Thursday night session. And we've found that as we continue to do these, that they kids seem to be more and more, talkative. So at the start it was like, oh, nobody wanted to say anything, but probably the last couple of weeks, everybody's been very involved in talking and sharing, and so that's been a positive. So, and then as I mentioned, one of the activities we did was a drum making over 2 days, and that was led by Mr. Leach, and that's one of the costs that we didn't have to incur was the drum making material. So he was able to supply all that for us, and then as well as the knowledge to put them together. So that was an excellent opportunity for them to make a drum. And then Cheryl has a weekend plan where we're going to do like a camp out at her place on her property in Mission. And then she's invited an artist to come and teach the kids how to paint their drum with a design. So that's another activity that we're planning. And so we've done a hike on weekends as well. So we're trying to do maybe one outing per month. And so we've done a go-kart weekend, and then we also done hike in North Vancouver. And we also have Big Splash Water Park planned in July. And we also have Staff Sergeant White, who's a reservist with the Royal Canadian Air Force. He's going to be taking some of them on a flight from where's Pitt Meadows, I think is his airport. So from Pitt Meadows to downtown, like through Vancouver, over Vancouver, and do a return trip to Pitt Meadows. So we have that planned in July as well. So yeah, so we've done a few activities that we want to try and do with them. So over the summer, right now our last event will be on next week. Next Thursday will be our last event. So we were able to have approximately, we're pretty steady now. It's about 20 youth that attend. We have we started out with 7, and then it's just kind of grown because a lot of them invited their friends, and some have heard about it through the Aboriginal Community Policing Center. So right now we're pretty consistent with 20 to 22, 23, and we've had probably another 10 altogether that were like drop-ins. So we've probably had around 30 to 33 youth that have actually come and did maybe 1 or 2 sessions. So we're pretty happy with that. We thought 7 was okay, but when you get up in the 20s, like 20 or so, like we're pretty happy with that. So and we were fortunate enough to have Chief Officer Jones, Chief Officer Palmer, Inspector Huber, Deputy Chief Chow, Mr. Superintendent Tran, Superintendent Furlan, Inspector Young attend our inaugural inspection last night. It really was well received, and lots of positive feedback from that from the parents afterwards. So we appreciate them attending, and I thought they did a really good job because we haven't done much. We have done drill, but not standing in one spot for like 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes, whatever. The thing was a long time. So I thought they did pretty good. But overall, Rick and I and Cheryl, who also helps myself, and Shiraz Hanif, Tyler Ukart as police officers, and then Tyler's partner Cynthia are our main team leaders. And then we also have Mr. Daryl Gray, who's studying for his PhD doctorate in social work. We have him as a volunteer as well. And we have volunteers from our Waterfront police station, community policing center. So we have a really good core of people that are dedicated, and they're really hardworking because they do a lot of work getting things set up every Thursday and on our outings. So I think that's it. So right now our funding is doing pretty well so far. So we're looking to expand. I'm always looking for funding as well. So we're looking at some other sources as well. So I've got a couple other projects that we have funding for. But otherwise, I think it's been a really good start for our program, and we're just going to take a break for the summer, except for probably 2 or 3 activities that we had planned, and then we'll start up again in September. Hopefully, with COVID rules kind of loosening, we'll be able to get more kids in, because we're pretty much capped at about 25 right now for the gym. So hopefully we'll see what happens in the fall. So thank you very much for your attention, and if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer if you have time. All right, thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question? Or
You're muted, Sarah.
This is a great program, and I was just saying thank you to Constable Rattray and offering to commend you. It's fantastic. But Ali, you have a question?
Thank you. Yeah, I do agree. It's great to have these things being spearheaded by our organization. Is there opportunity for like outside sponsors or for funding and budgets? Like, do you have visions of that going forward?
Well, one of the things we're looking at for this fall is a better uniform, and we will be approaching one of our suppliers that we deal with, DNS Tactical. I know they've sponsored the Waterfront Community Policing Center. So I've already approached Mr. Leach, and he has some funding available for uniform. So we want to get them like a collared shirt, some pants, and some boots. And they can use that for, special parades and things like that, because we want to try and do COVID's been really tough because we want to go out in the community and do some different things. And some of the things are like the Indigenous Remembrance Day parade, to go march in that, or any other type of parade, right? So we want them to be, presentable and have good uniform. So we've approached Mr. Leach, and so we're looking at so hopefully we can team with DNS Tactical in New Westminster. So that's one of the proposals that we have going forward. So, but other than that, we don't have much other funding right now. So, thanks.
Thanks. I mean, I do think you do have an opportunity, and especially in the mood and climate here, to seize people's interest in supporting programs like this that affect Indigenous. So I think you should work with the chief and brainstorm, because I mean, there'll be groups that will want to support and they'll see the benefit of it and the right thing to do. And I commend you, but there's an opportunity here to make what you're kind of incubated here something big and special too. So, or more opportunity. So anyway, great work.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Murray?
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to say, Kirk, that I really appreciate the program, and I appreciate the approach you're taking to it. Very, very non-threatening and welcoming approach. So just in this interaction, I can sense how, the kids would feel very welcomed by you to come back once they've been there once. So keep up the good work, and I look forward to the program expanding and making really positive impacts in kids' lives that need assistance. So good on you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And just to say, Chief Palmer and Chief Jones did an excellent job with the last minute speeches for the youth, where I think they really hit home and they're really positive. So again, thank you for that, Chiefs. Appreciate it. Thanks.
If I can just offer comment, Sarah, that seeing the program, and there was a comment that some social media went out last night, is one of the goals of this program is to connect the kids to their culture and provide those opportunities. And I kind of really, was shown last night. There was a grandmother there. She was by the big drum near the end there, Kirk.
Yeah.
And she spoke of how, she's got 2 grandsons, that she wants to expose to the culture. And that's part of this program, it's not necessarily like a recruiting tool or anything of that nature. It is actually is to get these, as Kurt would say, and Cheryl, the urbanized Indigenous youth who come from northern BC or somewhere else into this community, is about connecting them with their culture and that. In fact, there's one young lady there who, as I understand, comes from Kurt's home area, the Tahltan?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. And so they would never have known each other, because I think Kurt's been gone long enough, but although he looks young, an interesting connection, for her being in the city of Vancouver and having someone who came from what is her home community in northern BC and being able to reflect on it. So it's an important part of this program is getting kids to connect with their culture and within this environment. So congratulations to Kurt and Cheryl and everyone else, Rick LaValle and them, everyone who's involved with this.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, the connectedness is the solution, I think, to many of the ills that plague us. Yeah, connectedness. Do we have a video, Stephen?
Yes, we do have the video from the TransLink AGM yesterday. So just 3 minutes in length. I thought it'd be good to share.
Yeah, that would be great. Is there sound?
No audio, Stephen.
We might have to post that on the website afterwards.
The audio didn't work.
Yeah, audio is not coming through.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, well, we'll post it on the website after the meeting so people can view it. Does anyone else have any more questions or comments? Thank you, Constable Rattray. This is fantastic work, and we really, really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks again. I appreciate it. Having the time. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the day. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Okay. So we'll move on to item 2.2, Chief Officer Report.
So usually at this time, I'd like to take the opportunity to allow the divisional representatives or managers. So I'd ask, I know Barry Cross has to step out, so Barry perhaps can provide a bit of an update from the administrative side.
Thanks, Chief. Just want to talk about 3 areas, recruiting, training, and facilities. There's lots going on, so I've just distilled it down to the latest and greatest. But on the recruiting side of the house, as you're aware, we just hired 3 female members. They've started in class 165, which started on May 31st. So they're starting their journey into policing as a career, which is exciting. Class 166 will start in September, and our recruiting team right now is working hard to get 6 people into that. We have 6 seats allocated to us for September. And I think we've got 4 binders almost complete, and they're working on the next couple. So we'll have that done fairly soon. On the training side of the house, lots and lots going on. So this is really just a very small snapshot of training that's already occurred or is planned for the balance of 2021. But we just completed our pistol transition. As you're aware, we've converted from a 40 caliber pistol to a 9mm pistol. And as you can imagine, we've got about 190 police officers that we had to rotate through the range with our firearms instructors. So they did a fabulous job. The chief and I were out together on our transition, and a little bit of a friendly competition between the 2 of us. I think he probably had a little better target than I did. I'll just say that publicly right now. In addition, on our carbine program, we've just completed another session of carbine training. And so that was recertification for all of the users that we have. And we have to look at trying to find a way to squeeze in some more periodic training throughout the year. But the chief and I talked about how we might fit that into our budget. We also just finished a reintegration training, and we talked about this once before. And this is certainly something that we put into place when young Josh Harms was shot in Surrey, and others who were involved in that particular call. And the reintegration training looks at officers who are off because of crisis issues, and then making sure that we have a good program in place to get them back into the workspace in a very thoughtful, methodical, and safe way, so that they can come to grips with the emotions that they have as a result of the trauma, and make sure that they are balanced and that they have a great understanding of the issues that they're facing, and so that they can get back as full-fledged officers working out there on the street. So we just finished another training program. We have a number of others that are trained in that. So it gives us some flexibility down the road to be able to implement that program for our officers. As you're aware, we have the simulator that is out in Delta. That's a combined group effort from a number of municipal agencies. and they're just doing some updates to the training that goes on with the simulator. So all of our use of force trainers, and we've got a number of them, are going to be rotating through that to make sure that they're up to date on the latest and greatest, and the techniques that they're going to put towards training the balance of our officers as they cycle through the year. Lots of other training and policy going on through CPKN, which is the Canadian Police Knowledge Network. As you know, that's an online attribute that we have available to be able to get training done, especially during the COVID environment when we can't squeeze people into one big training room. So we've gone to online training for a lot of what we do. They've just finished doing an acknowledgement and sign off on our human resources policy. That's an annual program now. We just had a 2S LGBTQ training from CPKN as well. We launched that in February, so members are in the midst of getting through that program, a number of hours that they squeeze in throughout their shifts week after week. And then we have a cultural awareness and humility training that's coming up right now. It's due for all our officers to complete by August, and it's 3 hours online. So again, the sergeants that are on the road have to find a way to allow their members to get in and do this, either in one 3-hour block or in smaller components, but that will be done as well. And as I say, there's several other training programs available on CPKN that we have introduced and are introducing for the balance of the year. And just really quickly to talk about facilities, this is certainly top of mind, and it's been a big issue for us for quite some time, trying to make sure that we've got the right sized facilities for all of our officers. And as you're aware, the catalyst for a lot of this was the fact that we've done such a good job in our diversity hiring, and our number of female officers in the transit police is growing exponentially. And I think, as I reported last at the Human Resources Committee, we've been hiring at a rate of 44% for women in the transit police, which is going to increase our overall women in the transit police. But the Bridgeport side of the house, so that's our Richmond office, our West Division, we did a big renovation, or we're in the midst of a renovation there. We took on some additional space. I think it's around, 4,000 square feet, Chief, I think roughly about that area. That construction was completed on June 14th. And so on Monday, June 21st, we'll be going out to do an opening ceremony, and we'll be having Chaplain Jim Turner come out to do a little bit of a blessing for us for that new facility. So I think we've had some pretty good feedback so far. And then phase 2 of that reconstruction will be taking the existing space and repurposing that so that we can increase the women's locker room area there. So we'll be doing a little bit more work on design, and then stepping forward to get approval for that. At Sapperton headquarters here, as the Chief mentioned, I'll be stepping off shortly to go to a presentation with the Capital Management Committee. That is for both phase 1 and phase 2 approval. So there's around 8,000 square feet that we have repatriated that TransLink BTS used to have, and that's been turned over to us. So it's been a fairly long process in design and approval, but the Capital Management Committee meeting today is the last stage in a presentation for what that will look like and what the cost of that will be. So a little bit of cost increase from what the thumbnail sketch was originally when we were looking at it, but hopefully I can convince them today of the importance of that work. And again, that will increase the women's locker room space here at headquarters, and then will allow us to look at the balance of that space for what the future work in that space and flexibility for the rest of our officers will look like as well. So that's a quick update on those items, and happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Barry. Does anyone have any questions? Well,
Great.
I'm glad to hear our hiring is up, and I'm glad to hear that this construction hopefully will get going, because I know it's been a long road
Yes,
to get this done, and it's important. People need space to change, among other things, and it's important that we continue this work and that we continue to grow the percentage of women in the service. So go get them.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I know Barry's probably going to step off here and go get all that funding we require. I'll just ask Superintendent Anita Furlan to speak about the op support side that's been work that she covers.
Good morning, everyone. Just go quickly through all of my units. So for our canines, we retired police dog Lucy in May after over 8 years of service, and her handler has gone back to the squads. And we have 2 new puppies in training, and actually both those handlers are women. So we actually have an equal share of male and female dog handlers. So those 2 puppies are just making their way through, and they've got some training to do. The crime suppression team, so this was a pilot project that first initiated in the fall. So as of May, that is now a permanent unit that is led by a sergeant with 5 constables. And really the premise behind it is to have a proactive team available that can quickly and effectively really respond to any issues or trends that we're seeing. So some of the things that they've been doing recently is they just worked with the VPD youth squad to conduct some youth curfew checks. There is a group of youths in the Vancouver and Transit areas that seem to be doing personal robberies, etc. They've been on our radar for a while. So, you know, both with, you know, the work that we do in the community engagement team, and also the crime suppression team is on the enforcement side. So sometimes we do need to move to that enforcement stage if we're not having luck. So the crime suppression team assisted with that. And we did find one of the females that we had a warrant for during that time, as well as another subject who had a Canada-wide warrant as well. The crime suppression team is working with Burnaby to do a joint project for a boost and bust. So often crime is committed or shoplifting, and then they jump onto transit. So that's something that they'll be working on this month. And they've also reached out to New Westminster, West Van PD, and Richmond, just really to make introductions and to tell them what the crime suppression team's about, that they're a new unit, and they could certainly do joint projects with those jurisdictional partners, and certainly they'll be reaching out to the others that we have as well. There was one really great thing. The second day that they were in the start of the unit, they actually were able to seize a handgun from a significant gangster in the Burnaby parking lot. I'm sure many of you saw that on Twitter or social media, but it was just being at the right place at the right time while they were actually just doing some surveillance training. So excellent work there. From the community engagement team, as you heard from Constable Rattray, I was honored and so impressed last night to be at the Blue Eagle Cadet Parade, and it's really an exceptional program. I won't go into more. He's told you everything there. We also have the Waterfront Community Police Center, which right now has up to 56 volunteers. So that's going very well. They've done over 400 or 500 volunteer hours since its inception. And they just assist, like you heard, they assisted with the Blue Eagle Cadet Program. They'll go out and assist our other neighborhood police officers with, we've been doing quite a lot of pop-ups for anti-Asian hate, anti-harassment in different stations. And they assist with that, as well as just providing visible presence on the system to augment the police officers out there. Like I said, they've done those anti-harassment campaigns at Metrotown, at Richmond Bridge House, and they've been really well received. We also have our brochures that are also translated into Punjabi, Cantonese, and Mandarin. And Stephen can probably confirm we're also working on Korean. So that certainly assists us when working with some of our different cultures and being able to provide that in their language. As you were mentioning previously, George, Constable Bruce Shipley is amazing in his homeless outreach. On top of the work that he does really in the Richmond and Vancouver areas, he also does a significant amount of training on system safety to to many of the other TransLink enterprises, even the cleaners. He provided some kind of de-escalation training in case they come across people, and it's very well received by the other parts of the enterprise for them to have this training that's provided by Bruce. And he's such an exceptional leader, and he's so entrenched in so many committees concerning homeless and outreach that really he is such another valuable person in my team. We're also working on system safety for returning students. So they'll be providing presentations that can be done from UBC, Douglas College, SFU, et cetera, just to make sure that those students coming back to go to regular studies are feeling safe and secure on the system, and they understand all of the safety protocols that we have in place and what they can do, the texting, et cetera, and how they can get a hold of police when needed. So that's also in the works. And lastly, obviously, with the tragedy that occurred in London, Ontario, our Muslim community was obviously very concerned. And Constable Shiraz Hanif is another amazing neighborhood police officer. He was not only out at the Blue Eagle Cadet event last night, he went directly from there over to Richmond to provide just really a talk to many of the Muslim community of which he is a part, to just provide them some reassurance that we are there for them. He's doing this jointly, a lot of these jointly with RCMP members or other members of different departments, BPD, just to really go out and provide that outreach to our Muslim community. Particularly today, he'll be going out on prayer day just to ensure that they know that we're here and are willing to listen and assist in any way we can. So just amazing work. I haven't spent a lot of time in the community policing realm, and I am continually blown away by the quality and amount of work this small unit does and the impact they have in our community. So to me, I commend them. They are all amazing members of our department, and I'm so very proud to be leading them. The last couple of things, we were successful to get a civilian forfeiture grant for a drone program. So we'll just be working on that. And that's going to be really helpful, especially with the expansion, the Broadway expansion and more subterranean tunnels, just from a safety perspective for our members. So that's something that was just over $8,000 that we received. And also, I think I speak on EDI. I am on the BC Association of Chiefs of Police Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee, as well as the TransLink Task Force EDI Committee. And I was able to provide them a presentation to the TransLink board on June 1st on much of what I've just kind of told you, the outreach that we are doing within our community. And really the TransLink task force was really impressed with the amount of work being done by the transit police in terms of outreach and inclusion with our various communities that we serve. And also from an internal perspective, I put something in a bi-monthly update that we provide to all of our membership, not just the sworn, all personnel within the transit police. It's called the Informer and has all kinds of updates. And I include something on equity, diversion, and inclusion, even simple things as what exactly is EDI, what's the definition of a microaggression, why do we use and how do we use pronouns? And I've had some really, really good feedback from people, because this is just, it's a new area that I think a lot of people are talking about, but not a lot of people have awareness on. So yeah, that's keeping me pretty busy, as well as, continuing to understand how the senior executive works within transit. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. That's great. And it's always good to hear about all these initiatives, which, there really are too many to list sometimes. So thank you for letting us know and giving us some detail. And absolutely, we commend the people who are doing this great work, Constable Shipley and Simkin and Rattray and everyone who, because it's Constable Shiraz, it is demanding and challenging and super important. So really, again, connection. That's how we get to where we want to go. So thank you. Does anyone have any comments?
Just one I've got, and same thing that you just said, Sarah, and to Superintendent Ferland, the item that you had included in the package, which was the June 21st TransLink board meeting material, was great because it kind of covered off a lot of the things you were talking about. And so often it's just focused, I think, we as a board and others maybe just on some of the activities that are of a criminal nature, but it's more the proactive things that are going on. And that's great. One thing that I thought was really good was the outline in the table that you did and the folks in the team, the performance measurement culture, talking a little bit about the stats, being able to identify that. Again, I think it's so important that we measure going forward. And COVID has created obviously some changes. The chief has mentioned this many times with regards to the fact that maybe ridership has gone down, but that doesn't mean the criminal aspects has gone down. It's quite the opposite by the number of riders and the percentage and so on. And I think if we can continue to report against that, we can make sure that coming out of COVID with the increased ridership, with kids going back to school in September, things getting back to normal, that we can measure those things going forward over the next year.
Absolutely.
There is a program that we're working on. I think Stephen might, I'm trying to remember the name, that Alex Dykoff, that we're looking at, that will help measure what we're doing on these, you call them almost the intangible things, like how many times we make connection with homeless, how many times we are involved with community groups and that. So there is a type of program that the members will be able to follow that in these units. So George, so right now, as I understand it, it's in procurement, or maybe Dex knows what it is. If I understand, it's in procurement right now. So
yeah, I could jump in. It's called Snowflake, and it's basically a data cloud warehouse based. It's with TransLink and procurement, and they're just going through some of the legal hurdles to ensure it's going to. They're looking at it enterprise wide to actually utilize it, not just for us here at the police, but within the entire TransLink enterprise. So it's taking a little bit more time, but we are also tracking those metrics on another internal mechanism right now, just as a stopgap. So we will continue to have those metrics available.
Yeah, no, I just think the report was really good. It humanizes. It also, I think, demonstrates the outreach of what is really a beat kind of style of that specialized department that we've talked about, the service. So it's great, and I look forward to further reports like that.
Does anyone else have any comments? I'm glad to hear that we're going to be finding more tools to help us measure this work, and that will help us refine it, find out what's most successful and not, and that's really critical to making sure that we reach our objectives. So this is in procurement, and so can you tell me just a little bit about how that works? Like, not the procurement piece, but what kinds of things will this measure?
It has like the community engagement team has put out all kinds of things. So they call them touches. Anytime that they would go things, so they would measure like what I was talking about. So Constable Hanif going out to the various mosques, speaking to Muslim. All of these things would actually be measured, but it would be done very quickly through basically an app on the phone that they just be able to tap. They're doing something else right now to capture that, but they had, I would say probably 30 different kind of categories and subcategories. So I can't go into them all, but that's the premise behind it, obviously, is that we'll be able to really provide a defined, report on what the time and effort is that they're putting in. Really a lot of the proactive that doesn't get tracked any other way. It's hard to find
tools and methods for making sure that we can really see and get some visibility into that kind of work, which is really the core of a community policing approach. So that's great. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, I can provide a further update on that. So it wouldn't capture any personal information.
Right.
The data, and then we could use external software or other software like Tableau to extract that data and enter it into a report, which would, be more easier to understand and see what we actually captured over time and so on.
Right. Okay, that's great. Good. Glad to hear it.
Oh,
Okay.
So as you may have noticed there that Inspector Huber was kind of a last minute substitute as Deputy Chief Cumberworth needed to take some time off today. So I don't want to put him on the spot, but he said he can give a brief update here. I introduced him as being here to observe and answer any questions. But Anita talks about one part. We have a lot of members doing a lot of good work. So Dax has sent me a note saying he's going to give you a real brief update on ops.
Good morning. Thanks for the invite. Appreciated being here. My name is Dexter Huber, so I'm the operations inspector. I look after patrol members, so for the East Division and West Division, so out of headquarters in Bridgeport. Just give you an overview, it's about 92 constables, 12 sergeants and 4 staff sergeants, plus I got 2 support operations staff sergeants that work for me, and also our target mobile enforcement team. So they're broken down into squads for each side. And I just want to give you an update on COVID, which, it's hopefully coming to an end soon. But over the last year, we've been very fortunate. We've had very few COVID outbreaks in departments, especially on patrol. But if you have an outbreak on patrol, it just can be devastating. We had a couple little incidents, but overall, we were very lucky. And I'm so thankful for that, Over the year, we've modified our in-person briefings numerous times, where we sat here at first. I remember when everybody looks back, March last year when it happened, July, they said masks don't work. And all of a sudden, weeks later, everybody will wear masks. And here we are, everybody on transit wears masks, and it's normal now. So, but yeah, we started off with in-person briefings where we wore masks, and we had to reduce the amount of people within the briefings. And then we went to telephone briefings, to Zoom briefings, and hopefully in July, we can get back to some sort of a normal again where, we can have that in-person briefing, because it's so important, especially with us being separated between East and West. You need that connection. We're all human, so we need a good connection. But I mentioned Anita mentioned that CST was able to seize a gun on their crime suppression team, but I just want to highlight one of the good files that we just recently had, which was on Sunday night, where our members, keen-eyed, working at the Westminster SkyTrain station, observe a male with a duffel bag, and he later boarded the bus. We checked him on the bus, and he ended up having a shotgun. So that was nice to see, removing shotgun off the system. Who knows what his plans were, right? So great work. A lot of members, they're constantly working out there every night, keeping the system and keeping the people safe out there. Just another update on our target mobile enforcement team. They're doing some great work out there, in and around the system, working with our jurisdictional partners, working at the major hubs, even distracted drivers, that making sure that people that can come to the system are safe, and that are going to the system are using the crosswalks. So people on cell phones at those intersections, at those crosswalks, very important work. And they also look after the enforcement portion on the system and mask enforcement and so on. Some of the other things the squads are doing, they're doing what's called project blocks. So each block, a team of 2 and a supervisor will focus on some of the hotspots, some of the known areas that we should look at. Newton Busto, they do more active patrols in and around those systems. They work on a West Coast Express to make sure that's safe as well. So there's a lot of good work being done by everybody. So again, thanks for the invite.
Thanks, Dex, and appreciate that he got short notice here. Last night in the locker room, I think I asked him if he was going to get the meeting as we were leaving the Blue Eagle cadet program at about 8 o'clock. So said, "Are you going to be on the call tomorrow morning?" So anyway.
Thanks. I think it's really important that we acknowledge how difficult policing is and how many skills our members have to have in their toolkit every day, all the time. They're pivoting from, what you're talking about, Inspector Huber finding a shotgun on a bus and pulling that guy into custody and helping homeless people and children and doing the kind of outreach that we do. Community policing is incredibly specialized and incredibly skilled and requires enormous commitment and intelligence and compassion from people who are brave and kind. And I know that every single one of our members is really doing their best every single day. And I really want to thank them. It's impressive to be able to pull that number of skills out of your back pocket and pivot back and forth in the course of a day is not common. It's difficult and skilled, and we thank them.
Thank you.
And that would be the report that I give. I now let them talk. Yeah, I think you'll see the items under the Chief Officer Information Report, Indigenous Relations, JPD, other than JPD collaborations. And I would just be really brief saying, we are collaborating. We are assisting in a BPD gang task force. We're assisting IHIT with some of their things. And the new crime suppression team, as you hear, is out liaising with each of the jurisdictions and obviously right down to the patrol members, right? There is a coordinated response throughout the Lower Mainland, which we're part of. And that's, I would leave it as that. So.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay. Well, we're scheduled now to have a brief recess. So let's take 5 minutes and we'll be back in 5. Are you okay? Please join us. Okay. Please join us. Aye. Okay, let's call it back to order. Am I still on mute? No, you can hear me. Okay. All right, so we're moving to item 3, other business, and item 3.1 is report from the chair of the Finance Committee. Ali?
Great, thank you. The open agenda discussion is the report that we've for public submission of budget variances on the quarters. And as you can see from the report, that the management is doing an excellent job in keeping costs in line, and we're ahead of budget on a number of factors and overall. We had a lot of discussion around that and overtime and the implications, and nothing else to report other than good job by the finance group.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. And report from the chair of the governance committee, George?
Sure, we met on May 17th. And again, if Murray or Carla want to jump in with anything with regards to this, we actually invited the executive director from the Calgary Police Commission to attend. Heather Spicer, has been involved in a number of national activities around good governance. And I thought it was a very useful discussion. We talked about a number of things that we probably will be able to integrate within a lot of the activities that we do here at the Transit Police Board, including some onboarding things that I know that we'll discuss probably at a later point in the meeting. Generally, we're making some good progress on a number of items around the risk matrix and so on. Again, that's on the agenda for later. So I can leave it at that. But if Murray and Carla have anything else to add, please do so.
Anything to add? Okay. All right, so maybe we could move to the next item, and we want to have a little talk about the future state of board meetings. With the restrictions easing, we want to talk about how we may proceed. Should we consider continuing in this format? Should we consider asking the governance committee to look into how we might safely meet in person? The governance committee also wanted to talk about extending the duration of the meetings in an effort to eliminate some of the time constraints on the on the agenda. George, could you maybe talk about this idea a little bit and introduce it?
Sure. It was really just more along the lines of meeting flow and ensuring that everybody's time is being well used. Certainly not a desire for more reports and other information. It really is to ensure that there's adequate time for full discussion on the material that is presented by the executive and by others. I think the feeling that we had, and again, I will ask Murray to speak and Carla as well, was that there are many occasions where we seem to be running up against the clock. That's a common phrase, running up against the clock. We're running out of time. We don't have, and so therefore, I think some of the discussion and the debate in a manner which is probably required gets put to the side just because we're looking at the end of the time. This isn't meant to extend meetings endlessly. It's just meant to ensure that if we added an extra half hour or an hour into the board meeting itself, we don't have to use it up. But therefore, I think a lot of the folks on the board will feel comfortable delving into subjects a little bit more deeply and not feeling necessarily that they're constrained by time. So that's kind of the starting point with this. The committee makes a recommendation in that regard. We recognize everybody's time is important, and we're not wanting to impose more, but we are wanting to ensure that the issues of importance are debated and the information comes out. And again, Murray and Carla, would you like to say anything in addition to this? Otherwise, we can open up for a bit of discussion.
No, I think you've summarized it well.
Yeah, no, you have. Thanks.
Okay, does anybody have any views on this? I mean, I will say that I absolutely would like to find strategies to ensure that we have appropriate conversations. And it is always a challenge because our agendas are always very full and there are a number of things that, need appropriate attention. Equally, though, I think in my experience on this board, it is a fairly big commitment for people who have other commitments in their lives. And when we are meeting virtually, that is one thing. We're all, we don't have commutes. We don't have the whatever hour that it takes to get to the meeting and the hour that it takes to get wherever else you have to go. And in addition, the amount of time to prepare, all of that stuff. But I am concerned that adding additional time or adds additional workload that can be a barrier if we want to make sitting on boards something that people from different backgrounds and age groups and circumstances can do. I know that over the last number of years that I've been on this board, it has been challenging for me at different stages in my life to get here, to get to the meetings, to get the work done amidst all the other demands that I have. My children are grown now, but they weren't always. And so I am concerned that between the board meetings, the preparation, the committee meetings that everybody serves on, the preparation for that, the work involved in that, plus the amount of meetings because of our governance structure that our executive has to go to and prepare for, that we be very cautious that we don't have meetings for meeting's sake, and that we are very cautious about how we manage this workload so that we remain a board that can pull from different parts of the community and can encourage membership on this board from people who in the past might not have been able to serve. If you're self-employed, you have a little more flexibility over your time than if you're not. So those are my thoughts. In short, I'm cautious about this suggestion for those reasons. I wonder if anybody else has any opinion.
Obviously, my views on this, but I don't think I ever felt that we didn't finish a discussion or we always have the clock. So I don't know where this issue arose, but I'd love to know more. But I do think that, there's times that we kind of go tangentially off track. So that's, if we could just focus that for our meetings, I am sure we can 3 hours. And for me personally, 3 hours is a big time commitment, and the utility of my brain diminishes the longer the meeting goes. So yeah. I don't see having another hour is going to make it useful. So I would vote against that.
Yeah, and I would again say that once we are assuming that we will be back to in-person meetings, a 3-hour meeting is a 5-hour meeting. By the time you've done your travel to and from that meeting, it's basically a 5-hour commitment. So there's that to consider. And maybe I would suggest we maybe look at the agenda, or we see if we can leverage the committees more effectively. And we do go over time. I try to avoid that. But we don't always stick strictly to the 3-hour limit, although I have been fairly strict about that. So maybe we can look a little bit more closely at that. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I will sit back. Marty, you had some comments?
Yeah, I was just going to say that if we do the committees online go forward, I think that that's a good use. You could take the commute out of the committee side so that when we're back in person, it is for the board meeting. And, I'm okay with building in, say, a half-hour wiggle room into my schedule, as long as we keep the agenda at the 3 hours so that it's only used if needed, because I do find with meetings, if you book the time, it does get used. So, if we keep the agenda as succinct as possible, and I would be okay with putting, 15 or 30 minutes wiggle room at the end in case something does need further discussion.
And Carla?
Just to add to, when we were discussing it in governance, we're sort of looking at that on certain agendas where maybe there would have been more discussion, some of the more, subtle details, or, sort of to dive into something. Would it be okay? We're certainly very aware, raised some concerns about trying to extend the meeting to a regular 4-hour time slot with everyone's time and how everyone's busy. And acknowledging that we do go over, there's times where we go over 10 or 15 minutes, and you sort of work that into your schedule, knowing that it might be there. So, it's I like this sort of conversation about whether we perhaps have committee meetings continue to do that online, because, that does save literally 2 hours in your day where you're traveling back and forth, and really then focus, if we're meeting as a group, like what the importance of this and the discussion that we can have in these meetings about the really pertinent issues of the day. So, yeah.
Okay, and Stephen.
Yeah, I was just going to comment and say that obviously over the last year being on Zoom, we haven't been able to go out into the community and have board meetings at a community facility, but those might be the 1 or 2 meetings a year where you do consider adding a little bit of additional time to allow various members of that community group and within that municipality to come and provide delegations and provide input. Because I know the last time we did one of these at Mosaic, we were a little bit tight on time. We had a variety of different speakers come who want to speak to the board. So if anything, I'd probably have you consider those meetings when we're actually able to go back out and visit those community groups directly.
Does anybody have any other comments?
Yeah, with respect to sort of reintroducing in-person meetings, I think at some point in time we will do that. I think we're still in sort of that process of monitoring when and how we will get to that point. I know it was discussed at a meeting I was last week. Actually, it was this week, early this week, related to the Mayor's Council as well, and they were discussing it. And it's I think there is a need for us to just monitor over the summer how the restart plan evolves, how the COVID vaccination process evolves. And I think we'll be in a better position probably between now and September to, make a decision about when and how we reintroduce in-person meetings. But at this point in time, to say that they will happen, I think is a sure thing. To say that it will be, a September meeting or an October meeting, I think is a little bit difficult to speculate right now. So I think it's almost something that I would suggest that, the chair and care and monitor and maybe send out some notice at some point in time saying this is what appears to be possible, and get some feedback online maybe from the board to confirm that we're comfortable moving ahead with an in-person meeting at a certain date, subject to the evolution that we're experiencing.
Yeah, and I absolutely. Okay, I think that makes sense. I didn't mean to suggest that there would be we'll pull a switch and go back to the way things were. I think we all have to, ease back in and see and take it day to day. We're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not at the end of the tunnel just yet. And so maybe what we can do is sort of work out strategies to ensure that in this sort of second kind of transition phase, whatever we're in, we ensure that people are satisfied that we're having the right kind of conversation and that they don't feel like it's been truncated. But keep it on the agenda, that we sort of continually examine our efficacy, and if we find over time as we move back in potentially to in-person, we can continue to look at it. How do people feel about that? Governance committee, is that something that would be?
Sure. I think listening to everyone around the table, why don't we just defer this for further review in the fall once we know what the public health folks are saying, how everybody feels in terms of in-person meetings, comfort levels, second shots, all that sort of stuff. I agree that the Zoom works extremely well for the committee meetings. I think that's a very efficient way. And as Marnie said, happy, I think that will be something I think we need to discuss as a group. Can we do our committee meetings by Zoom and then the board meetings in person? And the meeting flow piece is really just ensuring that everybody feels comfortable that any items on the agenda can be fully discussed, and we don't have to wait another 3 months for a board meeting
Right.
to have that discussed again.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation. If you need something in terms of a recommendation, that we just review this in the fall once we understand the nature of how the meetings will proceed. And I agree, you as chair, Sarah, can kind of give us a bit of a heads up of your thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. And we can continue to work together to make sure that, I mean, you know, the last thing I think anybody wants to do is have meetings that aren't effective and that directors feel they're not getting a chance to really weigh the issues and consider the things that we have to consider. So we'll just keep it on the front burner, keep asking these questions. Okay, thank you. We'll move to item 5, the training updates. Marnie, Carla, and Ali all went to various training, and I'm going to report back on it. So who wants to go first?
I can go.
Great, thanks.
All right, so I did the training for governing in the public interest. So it's put out by the province, and it is all online. So it's 2 different modules online. You can tell it was designed originally for in-person. There are some kind of pieces of it that looks like it was meant for roundtable discussion. So it ends up just being more kind of reflection yourself. So you can get through it quite quickly online. I think in total, both modules took me probably an hour and a half to do. So this is a great course if someone is just appointed to a provincial board, so hasn't had any board experience for provincial appointees. It outlines what types of boards there are in the province, the principles that follow, mandate letters, things like that are kind of province specific. So it's a great first training for a new provincial appointee.
Great.
You get a certificate at the end. So if you like certificates, you get that as well.
Like a certificate and a little gold star on it.
You get a certificate. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody likes a certificate. Murray?
Sure. Yeah. I went to the original training session when they introduced the training governing at public interest, but were there more modules than just the 2, Marnie? Did you choose 2?
There wasn't, no, but there is on the site, there is, looks like they're coming. So it'll be more about specific committee work, the subsequent modules. So it'll be, finance committee, HR committee, that kind of thing. So they do intend to get more specific, but there's still only 2 modules.
Yeah, because I know in the conference that they acted as an initiator for this process of training. There were probably, I'm just thinking out loud here, but probably around 8 different sessions, Indigenous relations and diversity, things like that were separate modules in the conference that focused on those elements of board work. So I'm glad to hear that they have online modules and that they're adding to them to reflect the full spectrum of board related work.
Yeah, it looks like they're translating them online. It does seem like they were delivered originally in person, right? So they're adapting them. So it's probably taking them a bit of time.
And I know David Pilling at the last BC APB meeting had indicated that they are developing a curriculum for police board members, training of police board members that will be rolled out once the development of the curriculum is completed. And it will be an online training process for new police board members, which will be, I think it'll become a requirement if you're appointed to a police board that you go spend the time in doing the online work.
That would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And the other training that you did, that's Carla and Ali. Do you want to tell us about that?
I mean, I can start. We did and I think Chief Palmer was also on that course, but we did the fair and impartial policing. Obviously, in light of all the stuff that goes on, I thought it would be a little bit more technical on, the psychology and the upbringings and what's overall. It was fine. It was 4 hours. It went by pretty fast. I probably got a few nuggets, but for me, I found it a bit generic. And obviously, through doing it through Zoom, you really couldn't invoke the deep discussions to really to talk about the things that go through your mind about how we are all biased and how we're biased and how we deal with bias. But there was a few nuggets that I took home that that made the time worthwhile. So that's all I have to report from that meeting.
Carla?
Yeah, I'd like to say, I mean, it was good. I mean, we had a 30-year vet from Atlanta, Georgia, presenting to us. She had worked in 2 different police services. So interesting sort of, cultural differences. And it was, as Ali said, like, it was sort of an introduction to, if you had never taken sort of anything with regard to, understanding your own bias, sort of the science of that, confirmation bias, different kinds of bias. So it was kind of it felt like a bit of that precursor to what I would think is the real, specific kind of training where you're having those conversations about those sort of nuanced, interactions to really get at those, the challenges that each of us will have with the lens through which we see the world. And so we got to the end, and I've done lots of these types of trainings as a facilitator, where you get to the end and the real, meat of what we want to talk about is kind of squished into the last 15 minutes. And you're like, oh, but let's get those scenarios. We really need to dig into these because that's where the real learnings are. I was glad, I wanted to say thank you to VPD for making the space for us, and glad to see, Adam Palmer there, and administrators, people in the senior teams need to be in these sessions too. I think that's the other important piece that I know from just the research on this kind of training is that you want to have every level, every individual in these trainings, and you really want, it can't be a one and done. It has to be the follow-up on the conversations, the subtle nuances of bias that happen in those micro moments that you don't even know, that you're not aware of, that are there, that you need to draw your attention to. So great sort of, I think introduction, if you'd never had anything, knowledge around this, the real heart of the training needs to come in that last 30 minutes where Sandra Brown was laboring to sort of get us into those scenarios. And as Ali said, it was really hard because Zoom, you're not having this sort of interaction personally, but there's such great work to be done there. So I'm glad to be a part of it, and I'm really grateful that some seats were made available to us through VPD. So thanks.
Great. So, well, we're going to continue all this training. As you say, it's not one and done. So there'll be more opportunities to get deeper. So that's good too. Thank you. Does anybody have anything else they want to raise this morning before we close this portion of the meeting? I don't see everybody, so let me make sure. Okay, we're good. All right. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for September 24th at 9 a.m. We'll decide before then if we're going to be continuing to speak to the avatars of ourselves on Zoom, or if we will be in person. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll close this portion of the meeting at 10:34.